If you're hearing my story today, please don't judge me until you've heard every word. Because if someone had told me a year ago that I'd turn my back on my own homeless father, I would have laughed in their face. My name is Caleb Harrison. I'm 39 years old, and I built one of the most successful investment firms in downtown Seattle. Most people think I have the perfect life. A luxury penthouse overlooking Elliott Bay, a black Range Rover, tailored suits, a 7-figure bank account, and a reputation for making impossible business deals happen. People call me a self-made millionaire. For years, I believed them. I told myself that everything I owned, every dollar, every success, came from my hard work alone. But I was wrong. The biggest lie I ever believed wasn't told by a stranger. It came from inside my own family. And by the time I finally discovered the truth, the man I hated more than anyone else was sleeping on the streets. You probably think I'm a terrible son. Maybe I am. But before you decide, you need to know why I hated my father. Growing up, I watched my mother work 2 jobs. She cleaned offices during the day, waited tables almost every night. Some mornings, she came home just in time to make me breakfast before sending me to school. She was always exhausted, but she never complained. Whenever I asked where my father was, she gave me the same answer. Forget about him, Caleb. He made his choice. He isn't part of our lives anymore. As a little boy, I believed every word she said. As I got older, that belief slowly became anger. Then anger became hatred. By the time I graduated from college, I had already made one promise to myself. If my father ever needed me, I'd walk away the same way he walked away from us. For nearly 20 years, I kept that promise. Every Friday evening, I drove home using the exact same route through downtown Seattle. Not because it was the fastest, because routine made life predictable. There was only one place I couldn't avoid: the intersection of Pine Street and 4th Avenue. Every single week, the same homeless man stood on the corner. Long gray beard, an old green military backpack, a worn winter coat with holes in both sleeves. His cardboard sign never changed. Anything helps. God bless you. I never gave him $1. Not once. Honestly, I barely looked at him. To me, people ended up on the streets because of bad choices. That was the story I believed. Or maybe, it was the story I needed to believe. Then one freezing December evening, everything changed. Heavy snow covered the sidewalks. The temperature had dropped well below freezing. Traffic crawled through downtown. I was already late for an important dinner with investors. My phone rang. One of my partners needed approval to close an $8 million deal. I answered immediately. Business always came first. While I was speaking, someone knocked gently on my driver's side window. 3 quiet taps. Tap, tap, tap. I turned my head. It was the homeless man. Snow covered his beard. His lips were turning blue. His hands shook so badly he could barely keep them in his pockets. But he wasn't asking for money. He wasn't holding out a cup. Instead, he motioned for me to lower my window. I shook my head. He knocked again. Then he slowly mouthed 4 words. I knew your mother. Everything inside me froze. My heartbeat pounded so hard I could hear it. How could this stranger possibly know my mother? Before I could think, the traffic light turned green. I pressed the accelerator hard and drove away. In my rearview mirror, I watched him disappear into the falling snow. The entire drive home, I kept telling myself it was a scam. Nothing more. Homeless people noticed expensive cars. Some invented stories. Some guessed names. Some tried anything for a few dollars. That's all this was, wasn't it? But no matter how many times I repeated those words, one question refused to leave my mind. How did that old man know my mother? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the old man's face. Not because I felt sorry for him, Because of those 4 words. I knew your mother. By morning, I convinced myself I was overthinking it. I showered, put on my navy blue suit, grabbed a coffee on the way to the office, and buried myself in work. That's what I always did. Work solved everything. Or at least, it distracted me from everything. Around 9:30, my assistant, Lauren, knocked on my office door. She had worked with me for almost 7 years. She could usually tell what kind of day I was having before I said a single word. "Morning, Caleb." "Morning. You look like you didn't sleep." "I'm fine." She didn't believe me, but she also knew better than to argue. She placed a small envelope on my desk. "This was delivered about 20 minutes ago. No return address. No stamp. No one said who dropped it off." I looked at the envelope. It wasn't white anymore. It had faded into a dull yellow, as if it had been sitting in a drawer for years. Across the front, someone had written my name in blue ink. Caleb Harrison. The handwriting stopped me cold. I had seen those letters before. Not recently. Years ago. As a child. I slowly picked up the envelope. For some reason, my hands felt unusually heavy. Lauren noticed. "You okay?" "Yeah." "I just remembered something." She nodded and quietly left the room. The office suddenly felt silent. Too silent. For nearly a minute, I simply stared at the envelope. Finally, I opened it. Inside was only one folded piece of paper. No signature. No explanation. Just a single sentence. "You deserve to know the truth before it's too late." Nothing else. I turned the paper over. Blank. I checked the envelope again. Empty. Who sent this? And what truth? For the first time in years, I couldn't concentrate. Every financial report on my desk became meaningless. Every email felt unimportant. Around lunchtime, I gave up trying to work. I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking downtown Seattle. People hurried along the sidewalks below. Everyone had somewhere to be. Everyone except one man. Without thinking, my eyes searched the streets. Looking for him. The homeless man. But he wasn't there. I don't know why, but that bothered me. More than it should have. That evening, instead of taking my usual route home, I drove straight to Pine Street. The corner was almost empty. Cars rushed by. People walked past carrying shopping bags. But the old man was gone. I parked nearby and walked over to a woman selling hot dogs from a street cart. "Excuse me. The older homeless man who usually stands here. Have you seen him today?" She looked at me for a moment. "You mean Walter?" "Walter. So he had a name." She sighed. "He wasn't feeling well yesterday. Some volunteers took him to a shelter. I heard he collapsed." "Collapsed?" For some reason, my chest tightened. "It happens every winter," she continued. "Most people ignore them until it's too late." Her words stayed with me. Most people ignore them until it's too late. I thanked her and walked back toward my SUV. As I reached for the driver's door, something caught my eye. Lying near the curb, half covered in dirty snow, was an old leather wallet. It looked worn out, cracked, almost falling apart. I picked it up. There was no cash inside, just a faded photograph. The moment I looked at it, the world around me seemed to disappear, because the little boy smiling in that picture was me. I couldn't breathe. I stared at the photograph for what felt like forever. It was old. Its edges were torn. The colors had almost faded away. But there was no mistake. The little boy smiling beside a lake, holding a fishing pole almost bigger than he was. That was me. I remembered that day. I had been 7 years old. It was the only fishing trip I could ever remember. But something wasn't right. My mother always told me. My father had already abandoned us by then. So, who took that picture? I turned it over. Written on the back were 6 words. Our best day together. Summer 1994. The handwriting matched the envelope. My heart started pounding. How could that be possible? I climbed back into my SUV, locked the doors, and just sat there. The city around me kept moving. Car horns, sirens, people laughing. But inside my vehicle, everything was silent. I opened the wallet again. Hidden behind the photograph, there was a folded hospital bracelet. The name printed across it made my stomach drop. Caleb Harrison. My name. My birth date. The bracelet from the day I was born. Why would a homeless man be carrying something that belonged to me? None of this made sense. Unless... No. It couldn't be. I grabbed my phone. For the first time in almost 20 years, I searched for one name. Richard Harrison. My father. Nothing. No social media. No business records. No obituary. It was as if the man had disappeared from the world. Then I remembered something. My Aunt Linda. She was my mother's older sister. After Mom passed away 3 years earlier, we barely spoke. Mostly because every conversation eventually turned into an argument about my father. I pressed call. She answered after the second ring. Caleb, you never call. I need to ask you something. There was a pause. What happened? I found something. I need to know the truth. Another silence. Longer this time. Then she quietly asked, Did you finally meet him? The question hit me like a truck. My grip tightened around the phone. What do you mean, finally? She sighed. I always wondered how long it would take. Aunt Linda. Just answer me. Who is Walter? For several seconds, she didn't say a word. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. His name isn't Walter. It's Richard. I felt every muscle in my body go numb. No. That's impossible. My father left us. Mom told me he didn't want us. He chose alcohol over his family. He never came back. Aunt Linda started crying. Not loudly. Just enough for me to hear the pain in every breath. Caleb. Your mother loved you more than anything. But she wasn't perfect. What are you talking about? The story you grew up believing. It wasn't the whole story. My heartbeat echoed inside my ears. What story? She took a deep breath. The day your father disappeared. He didn't leave. He was taken away. I froze. What? He was arrested. For something he didn't do. My entire world stopped. No. That's not possible. Mom would have told me. She couldn't. Because someone threatened to destroy your family if she ever spoke about it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Everything I had believed for nearly 20 years was beginning to fall apart. Then Aunt Linda said the one sentence that changed my life forever. Caleb, your father never stopped looking for you. He just wasn't allowed to come home. I sat there in complete silence. The phone was still pressed against my ear. But I couldn't say a word. Everything I thought I knew about my father, about my childhood, about my family, suddenly felt like a lie. Finally, I managed to whisper, If he didn't leave us, then why didn't he come back? Aunt Linda let out a long, shaky breath. He tried. More times than you'll ever know. I closed my eyes. No. Mom would have told me. She couldn't. After your father was arrested, the entire town turned against him. People believed he had stolen money from the construction company where he worked. But there was never any proof. They needed someone to blame. So they blamed Richard. I leaned forward, resting my forehead against the steering wheel. This doesn't make any sense. He would have written. He did. He sent dozens of letters. What? You never received a single one. I looked down at the old wallet still resting in my lap. The photograph. The hospital bracelet. The handwriting. It was all starting to fit together. Who kept the letters? For a moment, Aunt Linda didn't answer. Then she quietly said, "Your mother." My heart sank. Why? Because she was terrified. Terrified that if Richard came back into your life, you would be dragged into the same danger that destroyed his. I shook my head. No. No, she would have never done that. Caleb, your mother wasn't trying to hurt you. She thought she was protecting you. But sometimes, good people make heartbreaking decisions. Tears burned behind my eyes. Not because I was ready to forgive anyone. Because I didn't know what was true anymore. I ended the call. And just sat there. Minutes passed. Maybe longer. Then my phone buzzed again. It was Lauren. "Where are you? We've been trying to reach you. The Reynolds deal is waiting." For the first time in my career, I didn't care. Handle it without me. There was silence on the other end. You've never missed a closing meeting. I know. Then I hung up. Business had always been my priority. Today, it didn't matter. There was only one thing that mattered now. Finding Richard. I started the engine and drove straight to the homeless shelter the woman had mentioned. The building stood on the edge of downtown Seattle. Old bricks. Small windows. A faded blue sign read, "Harbor Hope Mission." Inside, the smell of coffee and disinfectant filled the air. Volunteers moved quietly between rows of folding chairs. Some people were eating dinner. Others simply stared at the floor. A woman behind the reception desk smiled politely. "Can I help you?" I'm looking for someone." An older man. Gray beard. Military backpack. "I think his name is Richard Harrison." Her smile slowly disappeared. "I'm sorry. You just missed him." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "He refused to stay. He left about an hour ago." "Did he say where he was going?" She hesitated. Then she opened a small notebook. "He only left one message." She looked up at me. He said, "If my son ever comes looking, tell him I'm sorry I couldn't keep my promise." The room suddenly felt smaller. "What promise?" She slowly shook her head. "He didn't tell us." Then she reached beneath the counter, pulled out a small sealed envelope, and placed it in front of me. "He asked us to give you this. My name isn't written on it." "No," he said. "You'd know it was yours." My hands trembled as I picked it up. Across the front, written in the same familiar blue ink, were 5 simple words. "To my son, if it's time. Asterisk asterisk." I couldn't bring myself to open it. Not there. Not with strangers walking past me. Not while my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the envelope. I thanked the woman at the front desk, walked back outside, and sat alone inside my SUV. The rain had started. Tiny drops tapped against the windshield. For a moment, I simply stared at the envelope. 20 years. 20 years of anger. 20 years of believing my father had abandoned me. And now, everything seemed to be leading to this single letter. I took a deep breath, then slowly broke the seal. Inside, there were only 2 things: a folded letter and an old silver key. The key had a small metal tag attached to it. Locker 214. Union Station. Seattle. I placed the key on the center console, then unfolded the letter. The paper was worn. The edges were stained, as if it had been carried around for years. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My dear son, if you're reading this, it means you finally came looking for me. I've imagined this moment 1,000 times. I only wish I had the courage to believe it would actually happen. First, I need you to know something. I never abandoned you. Not for a single day. There wasn't a birthday I forgot. There wasn't a Christmas I didn't think about you. There wasn't a night I went to sleep without wondering if you were safe. I know you've hated me. You had every reason to. Because someone made sure you only heard one side of our story. I'm not writing this letter to ask for forgiveness. I haven't earned that. I'm writing because every son deserves the truth. I stopped reading. My vision blurred. I wiped my eyes, then kept going. There is something I've protected for nearly 20 years. Something that belongs to you. If you're ready to know everything, take the key. Go to locker 214 at Union Station. Inside, you'll find every letter I ever wrote to you. Every birthday card. Every photograph. Every newspaper article. Every court document. Everything I couldn't give you myself. When you've seen it all, only then will you understand why I stayed away, and why I kept my promise to your mother, even though it broke my heart every single day. The letter ended with just one line. I've always loved you, son. Dad. I lowered the paper into my lap. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. For the first time since I was a child, I cried. Not quietly. Not for a moment. I cried until I couldn't catch my breath. Because for the first time, I wasn't mourning the father I thought I had lost. I was mourning the 20 years we had already lost. When I finally looked up, the silver key was still lying beside me. Small, cold, ordinary. But somehow, it felt heavier than anything I had ever held. I started the engine without another thought. Union Station was only 15 minutes away. Every red light felt endless. Every minute felt like another year stolen from us. When I finally pulled into the parking garage, my heart was pounding harder than it ever had during any business deal. I hurried inside the station. People rushed past me with suitcases. Announcements echoed through the building. None of it mattered. I found the hallway leading to the storage lockers. Rows and rows of steel doors lined the wall. Locker 198, 205, 211, then 214. I stopped. The key fit perfectly. My hand froze on the lock. Because deep down, I knew that once I opened that locker, my life would never be the same again. I stood there for several seconds, my hand resting on the cold metal handle. Part of me wanted to walk away. If I left now, I could keep believing the story I'd lived with for 20 years. But another part of me, the little boy who had spent his childhood wondering why his father never came home, needed answers. I turned the key. The lock clicked. The metal door slowly creaked open. Inside, there wasn't money. There weren't valuables. There were 6 cardboard boxes, every one of them carefully labeled. Caleb, ages 8 to 10. Caleb, ages 11 to 13. Caleb, high school. Caleb, college. Legal documents. Family photos. My knees almost gave out. He hadn't forgotten me. He had documented my entire life. I pulled out the first box. On top was a birthday card. The envelope had never been opened. It read, "Happy 8th birthday, buddy." My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. "Dear Caleb, today you turn 8. I wanted to take you fishing like I promised. I even bought your favorite chocolate cake. But I know I won't see you today. Maybe one day you'll read this. If that day ever comes, please know your dad celebrated your birthday anyway. I lit 8 candles by myself, and wished that someday we'd celebrate together. I love you more than you'll ever understand. Dad." A tear landed on the paper. Then another. There were dozens of cards underneath it. Age 9, 10, 11. Every birthday. Every Christmas. Every graduation. Every milestone. He had written to me, even though he knew I'd probably never read a single one. I reached into the second box. There were photographs. Some had clearly been taken from far away. One showed me scoring a goal during a middle school soccer game. Another captured my high school graduation. Then my college commencement. Then a picture of me standing outside my first office building. I stared at it in disbelief. He had been there. Not beside me, but close enough to see me succeed. Close enough to take a picture. Close enough to smile. Without me ever knowing, I quickly searched for a note. Behind the photo, he had written, "I wanted to hug you today. Instead, I stood across the street. Seeing you happy was enough." My chest tightened. How many times had he watched me? Without letting me know, I opened the box marked legal documents. The first file contained court records, then newspaper articles, then witness statements. One headline caught my attention immediately. Local accountant confesses to embezzlement. Man wrongfully imprisoned for 19 years is exonerated. I stopped breathing. Wrongfully imprisoned. I flipped through the pages. Every document told the same story. The company accountant had stolen millions of dollars. To protect himself, he blamed my father. Witnesses lied. Evidence disappeared. The jury convicted the wrong man. Years later, a deathbed confession revealed everything. Richard Harrison had been innocent all along. I felt sick. My father hadn't abandoned me. He had lost 19 years of his life for a crime he never committed. I kept reading. After his release, he had tried to find us. There were copies of certified letters, court requests, private investigator receipts. Every attempt ended the same way. No response. One final document slipped from the folder. It was addressed to my mother. She had signed it. The date was only 3 weeks after my father's release. The letter contained one sentence that shattered what was left of my heart. "If you truly love Caleb, please stay away. Let him remember you as the man who left, not the man who came back from prison." I couldn't hold the papers anymore. They slipped from my hands and scattered across the floor. Everything I believed, had been a lie. Not because my mother hated my father, but because she believed she was protecting me. She had sacrificed the truth, so I could have a normal life. And my father, he accepted it. He chose to lose his own son, rather than risk destroying the life I had built. I sank to the floor in front of locker 214, surrounded by 20 years of unopened love. And in that moment, I realized something that broke me completely. The man I had ignored at that traffic light wasn't asking me for money. He was simply hoping his son would finally recognize him. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe an hour. Time didn't seem real anymore. The station around me kept moving. People laughed. Trains arrived. Announcements echoed through the building. But I couldn't hear any of it. All I could think about was that freezing night at the traffic light. He wasn't begging. He wasn't trying to trick me. He was trying to find the courage to speak to his son. And I drove away. I quickly gathered every letter, every photograph, every document, and placed them back inside the boxes. Then I noticed something I hadn't seen before. At the very bottom of the locker, there was one small wooden box. No label, just a brass latch. I opened it carefully. Inside was an old silver wristwatch. The leather strap was badly worn. Underneath it was another folded note. Unlike the others, this one looked new. The ink hadn't faded. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. "Caleb, if you've opened this box, then you're probably looking for me. I hope I'm still alive when you read this. But if I'm not, please don't waste another day hating yourself. None of this was your fault. You believed the story you were given. I would have believed it too. There's only one thing I want from you now. Don't remember me as the homeless man on the corner. Remember me as the father who never stopped loving his son. And if God gives us one more chance, meet me every Sunday morning, 9 o'clock. The bench beside Green Lake. It's where your mother and I had our first date. I'll keep coming, as long as I can." I looked at the date. My heart nearly stopped. The letter had been written only 5 days ago. 5 days. That meant there was still a chance. I looked at my watch. Saturday, 7:40 p.m. Tomorrow was Sunday. Tomorrow. 9 o'clock. For the first time in 20 years, I had somewhere more important to be than work. I drove home carrying the boxes. That night, I didn't turn on the television. I didn't answer business calls. I didn't even eat dinner. Instead, I sat on my living room floor, reading every letter my father had ever written to me, one by one. When I turned 16, he wrote about teaching me to drive. When I graduated college, he wrote how proud he was. When I opened my first office, he wrote that he had stood across the street for over an hour, watching people congratulate me. He wanted to walk over. He wanted to shake my hand. But he remembered the promise he had made to my mother. So he quietly walked away. Every page made my heart heavier. Around 2 in the morning, I found one final photograph tucked inside the last envelope. It had clearly been taken recently. My father was sitting on the same bench beside Green Lake, smiling at the camera, even though no one was sitting beside him. On the back, he had written only one sentence: "I'll save your seat, just in case you ever come." I couldn't stop crying. I held that photograph against my chest until the sun began to rise. At exactly 8:15 Sunday morning, I left my apartment. The drive to Green Lake usually took 25 minutes. That morning, it felt like forever. Every red light made me more anxious. What if I was too late? What if he had already left? Or worse, what if he never made it there at all? When I finally reached the park, I jumped out before the engine had even stopped. The morning air was cold. Families walked along the trail. Joggers passed by wearing headphones. I searched every bench, every path, every face. Then, near the edge of the lake, I saw the familiar green military backpack, resting beside a wooden bench. My heart pounded. I started running. "Dad!" The word escaped my mouth before I even realized I had said it. People turned to look. I didn't care. I ran faster. But as I got closer, I realized something was terribly wrong. The backpack was there. The old winter coat was folded neatly on the bench. But my father was nowhere to be seen. My legs gave out. I dropped to my knees beside the bench. "Dad!" I whispered again. No answer. Just the sound of the wind moving across the lake. I grabbed the old backpack. It was still warm. He had been here only minutes ago. An elderly woman feeding ducks nearby slowly walked toward me. "Are you looking for Richard?" I looked up. "Yes. I'm his son." The words felt strange coming out of my mouth. For the first time in my life, I was proud to say them. The woman's eyes filled with tears. "Oh, honey. He talked about you every Sunday." My heart pounded. "Where is he?" She pointed toward the parking lot. "An ambulance came about 15 minutes ago. He collapsed right here." Everything around me blurred. Which hospital? I think Seattle General. I didn't even thank her. I ran. I don't remember driving. I only remember praying. The entire way. For the first time in years. Not for money. Not for success. Not for another business deal. Just for one more chance. Please, let him be alive. Please don't let me be too late. I reached Seattle General Hospital in less than 10 minutes. I rushed through the emergency entrance. "I'm looking for Richard Harrison." The receptionist typed his name, then looked at me. "Are you family?" My throat tightened. "I'm his son." She paused, almost as if she didn't expect anyone to say those words. "Please wait here." Every second felt like an hour. Doctors walked past. Nurses pushed stretchers through the hallway. Monitors beeped behind closed doors. Finally, a gray-haired physician approached me. "Mr. Harrison?" "Yes." "I'm Dr. Bennett. Your father suffered a severe heart attack." I felt the floor disappear beneath me. "Is he?" The doctor quickly interrupted. "He's alive." Relief hit me so hard I almost collapsed. "But That single word stole my breath again. His heart is very weak. We've stabilized him. He's asking for someone named Caleb. Tears rolled down my face. I'm Caleb. The doctor gave me a gentle smile. I thought you might be. He hasn't stopped talking about you. My chest tightened. He talked about me. Constantly. He kept saying, "My son is coming. I know he'll come. I just have to stay alive long enough to see him." I covered my face with both hands. How could he still believe in me? After everything I'd done. The doctor placed a hand on my shoulder. "Come with me." As we walked down the hallway, I noticed something. Several nurses smiled as we passed. One whispered to another, "That's his son." I didn't understand. When we reached room 314, the doctor stopped outside the door. "Before you go in, there's something you should know." I looked at him. "Your father comes here every month. For treatment. He never had much money. So whenever he could, he insisted on paying a few dollars toward another patient's medical bill." I frowned. "What?" The doctor nodded. "Some months it was only $5. Sometimes 10. But he always said, 'Someone out there needs this more than I do.'" I stared at him in disbelief. A homeless man. Donated money? The doctor smiled softly. Richard Harrison wasn't defined by what he owned. He was defined by what he gave. Then he slowly opened the hospital room door. "There he is." I stepped inside. The room was quiet. Machines beeped softly beside the bed. The man lying there looked smaller than I remembered. Thinner. Older. His beard had been trimmed. His eyes were closed. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then, as if he somehow felt my presence, his eyes slowly opened. He looked at me. Confusion filled his face for a second. Then recognition. A small smile appeared, barely strong enough to lift the corners of his mouth. He whispered one word, "Caleb." And at that moment, I realized I wasn't too late. I couldn't hold back anymore. I rushed to his bedside. "Dad." The word came out broken, barely louder than a whisper. His eyes filled with tears. For a moment, neither of us spoke. 20 years of silence didn't disappear with one conversation. I slowly reached for his hand. It felt cold, weak, covered with scars I had never noticed before. "I'm so sorry." The words kept coming, over and over. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I left you there. I'm sorry I believed the lies. I'm sorry I never looked for you." He gently squeezed my hand. It took all the strength he had. Then he smiled. "You came." That was all he said. Not, "Where have you been?" Not, "Why did you abandon me?" Just, "You came." I broke down all over again. "I don't deserve your forgiveness." He slowly shook his head. "Son, there was never anything to forgive." I stared at him. "I ignored you. I drove away. I treated you like you were nothing." He looked at me with the same kindness I'd seen in the photographs. "You were hurting. I knew that. I was never angry. I only prayed that one day you'd learn the truth." A nurse quietly walked into the room. She adjusted his fore, then smiled at me. "You must be Caleb." I nodded. She laughed softly. "We've heard about you for years." I looked at her, confused. "He talked about me?" "Every visit." She smiled. "He always carried your picture. He told everyone. My boy is one of the smartest businessmen in Seattle. He's doing amazing. I'm proud of him. He never let anyone say a bad word about you." She quietly left the room. I couldn't stop crying. "Dad, I don't understand. After everything, how could you still be proud of me?" He looked toward the window for a moment, then back at me. "Because a father's love isn't earned. It's given, no matter what." I had spent 20 years believing successful people never cried. That afternoon, I cried harder than I ever had in my life. A few minutes later, I remembered something. The fishing trip. He smiled. You remember? I thought it was the only one. It was. I saved for almost a year to buy those fishing poles. You caught exactly one fish. He chuckled. It was tiny. But you acted like you'd caught a shark. For the first time, we both laughed. A real laugh. The kind families share. Then his smile slowly faded. There is one thing I need to tell you. His voice became serious. The man who framed me. I nodded. I read everything. He sighed. I forgave him. I stared at him. What? He admitted the truth before he died. He asked me to forgive him. And I did. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He stole 20 years from you. He stole your family. He stole your life. My father's eyes filled with peace. No. He only stole time. If I let hatred stay in my heart, he would have stolen my soul too. His words hit me harder than anything else I'd read. All these years, I thought strength meant winning, making money, being successful. But the strongest man I had ever met owned nothing, not even a home. Yet somehow, he carried more peace than anyone I'd ever known. He reached beneath his hospital blanket, slowly pulled out the old silver wristwatch from the wooden box. I've been saving this. He placed it into my hand. It belonged to your grandfather. He wanted you to have it someday. I looked at the scratched glass. It wasn't expensive. Not even close. But at that moment, it became the most valuable thing I had ever owned. I fastened it around my wrist. It fits. Dad smiled. It always belonged there. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't sitting beside a stranger. I was sitting beside my father. And for the first time in my life, I finally understood what it felt like to come home. Over the next 3 weeks, I barely stepped inside my office. For the first time in nearly 15 years, money wasn't my priority. My father was. Every morning, I'd bring him breakfast from the little diner across the street. He always ordered the same thing. 2 scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. Nothing fancy. One morning, I walked into his hospital room carrying breakfast. His bed was empty. My heart stopped. Dad. I dropped the coffee on the floor. The cup shattered. I rushed into the hallway. A nurse smiled. Relax. We took him downstairs for physical therapy. I laughed with relief. My hands were still shaking. That's when I realized something. 3 weeks earlier, I would have panicked if I lost $1 million client. Now, the thought of losing my father terrified me far more. Later that afternoon, we sat together in the hospital garden. The winter sun peeked through the clouds. It was the first time we'd ever simply talked. Not about the past. Not about prison. Not about lies. Just life. He asked about my favorite movies. My first apartment. The company I'd built. He listened the way every son hopes his father will. Like every answer mattered. Then he smiled. You know, I never missed your soccer games. I laughed. That's impossible. You were there. He nodded. The championship game your senior year. You scored the winning goal. I stared at him. I looked into the crowd after the game. I didn't see you. You weren't supposed to. I stood behind the concession stand. I cheered louder than anyone. A lump formed in my throat. Every milestone of my life. He had somehow found a way to be there. Even when he couldn't stand beside me. A week later, the doctors finally discharged him. I drove him to my penthouse. As we entered, he stopped in the doorway. It's beautiful. I looked around. The marble floors. The designer furniture. The massive windows overlooking Seattle. 4 years. I'd been proud of this place. Now, It suddenly felt empty. Too quiet. Too expensive. Dad noticed a framed magazine cover hanging on the wall. It showed me smiling beneath the headline, "The Self-Made Millionaire." He studied it for a moment, then looked at me. I never liked that phrase. I smiled. Neither do I. Not anymore. That evening, I cooked dinner. Well, I tried. The smoke alarm went off twice. We burned the first batch of chicken. Dad laughed so hard he had tears in his eyes. "I should have taught you how to cook." "You should have." For the first time, those words didn't hurt. Because now, there was still time. The next morning, I drove him back to Green Lake, the same bench where everything had changed. He sat quietly, watching the water. After a while, he said something I'll never forget. "Caleb, I don't need the years we lost." I looked at him. "I only need the years we have left." I nodded. "We'll make every one of them count." He smiled. "I know we will." Just then, a familiar homeless veteran walked past the bench. Dad reached into his coat pocket, out of habit, looking for money he no longer had. I quietly stood up, walked over to the man, and handed him a $100 bill. He looked shocked. "You sure?" I smiled. "No. I'm grateful." When I turned back, Dad was watching me. There were tears in his eyes. Not because of the money. Because he knew. His son had finally learned the lesson he'd spent a lifetime trying to teach. That day, I made another decision. One that would change thousands of lives. I sold my second vacation home, my sports car, and most of the things I once believed made me successful. A few months later, we opened the Harrison Hope Center, a place where homeless veterans could sleep safely, find medical care, receive legal help, and most importantly, be treated like human beings. Above the front entrance, we placed a simple sign. It didn't carry my name. It carried his. Richard Harrison Hope Center. The day we opened, my father stood beside me, healthy enough to smile, strong enough to hug me. As reporters took pictures, one of them asked me a question. "Mr. Harrison, what inspired you to build this place?" I looked at my father, then answered with complete honesty. "Because the greatest man I've ever known was once the man I refused to help."